Hey guys, what is going on? Thanks so much for watching the channel. Matt Smith here as always. Before I get rolling, like and subscribe. You know the drill. It helps me out a ton and I really do appreciate it. Just that little bit of effort makes a big difference for me, so thank you. Today was defense day, and the first day we talked about football at practice, which obviously Coach Prime's news just having been revealed less than 48 hours ago certainly hangs around everything and probably will for at least this season and moving forward as a testament to his resiliency and the type of resiliency he wants his players to embody, right? And that type of approach. Today was defense day. We spoke to Robert Livingston. We spoke to DJ McKinney and Carter Stoutmire, of course, corner safety and their defensive coordinator. Robert Livingston was up first. Great guy. I mean, I can't say enough good things about Robert Livingston, just as a human being. Secondly, a ball coach. He is really impressive, and there's a reason why he was courted this summer by NFL teams potentially to take over their defensive coordinator job. And I think that moving forward, that's going to be an occurrence that happens a little bit more frequently for him. I'm not sure how long he stays around Boulder, but one thing I do know is he and his whole family, immediate family, they love it. He's got young kids, and they have really taken to the community. As I've said so many times, it's a great place to live. It's an even better place to raise a family. Great schools here, very safe here, and I think they've taken to it quite nicely. And certainly he got himself a nice little bonus this summer for being damn good at his job, and now, of course, is the highest paid assistant in Colorado history. And quite frankly, he's been deserving of it and nothing else so far. And the one thing that I appreciate about Robert Livingston and the one quality about him that I think is underrated in coaching in general, that I think a lot of people say they do, but it's different when you embody it. It's caring about your players and being genuine. Look, you don't have to cry at the drop of a hat to be genuine and care about your players. But one thing that Robert Livingston does is he wears his emotions on his sleeve, and he's very real and upfront, easy to talk to. And I think that especially this younger generation, they really need a lot of that stuff. And he's become a very, very important piece of this puzzle. And again, I just hope he continues to be one. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he draws up this year, because you look at him and, you talk about players coach, that term. I think he is, but I think he's the total package. And so what did Michael Jordan say? The ceiling is the roof, right? Wasn't that his line when he fumbled it? The sky's the limit for this guy. I fully believe he will be a head coach in the NFL within the next 10 to 15 years, and he'll probably be a defensive coordinator in the NFL within the next 2 to 3. I mean, that's just the truth. That's just the type of rising star he is. So it's always a pleasure to get to talk to him. He talked about being scared for the man and Coach Prime when he heard the news, and certainly they held down the fort, being a bunch of very experienced coaches that Coach Prime has assembled here, a very good coaching staff. I've talked about that now. I really think this is their best staff. They've got to prove it, but I think he knows what he wants in a coach, and he's brought it into this program. Is it perfect? I'm not exactly sure. That's probably only a something he would answer in a private moment. But right now, I would say it's the best iteration he's had since he's been on campus. The one thing that you hear pretty much unanimously from the coaching staff and the players is just how big of a difference Andrew Swayze, their new strength and conditioning coach, made this summer, right? A lot of old school workouts. Carter Stoutmire talked about it today. He talked about garage workouts, running, right? Just doing the simple things that, we've had for many, many years, and it's worked. So why try and reinvent the wheel? And clearly the gains that everybody's made have been significant enough where Coach Prime, even at the end of the first practice, if you were able to tune into that well-off video, he specifically shouted out Swayze for seeing the difference in some of these guys and their ability to fly around the field, especially defensively. And so did Robert Livingston make the similar mention of that. And you just kind of look at some players and go, who is that? Oh, there's some significant changes, which is always what you want to hear about a summer conditioning program. So as far as that hire goes, another new hire into the program, right? 10 out of 10 so far. Everybody has raved about him. I mean, Alvin Kamara spent most of his summer, Saints running back, in Boulder training with him because he has his entire career. And I heard that clip of him being asked about spending so much time in Colorado. He said, look, Swayze's out there and I'm going wherever Swayze is. He could be in Alaska. I'll be in Alaska. That's what he said. So good to see that paying off because physicality is a part of the game that they hadn't figured out yet, in my opinion. And I think, especially this year, you want to talk about setting the tone on the offensive line, setting the tone on the defensive line. You've got to be physical. And more than that, it's about the fact they brought in a bunch of big guys. Because remember, Gunnar White, their offensive line coach, talked about how he wanted bigger players because it's easier to screw down from tackle to guard as opposed to guard to tackle like they had to try and do with Tyler Brown last year because they couldn't really find a better fit until Phillip Houston worked his way into the rotation. So you do have a bunch of big guys. But I would say that, when you're talking about some of these young men who are 300 plus pounds, not all of that is great weight, as we all know. And some of that can be, disguised a little bit, but it sounds like significant gains have been made. And sure, they want to gloss it, right? They want to certainly talk it up a little bit, but it really does feel like universally everybody was thoroughly pleased and probably a little bit pleasantly surprised with the progress made in the weight room, which is obviously we're talking about football here. I don't need to tell you how good that is. The thing about Robert Livingston that I really appreciate is he's just dialed in on football, right? He talked about how the player acquisition period of over the summer is just over, but maybe he had to take on a little bit of a larger role. But from speaking with him in the past, I know that he really tries to leave a lot of that stuff up to, their NIL director and the recruiting director and Corey Phillips and Reggie. And so he is really dialed on the football. And you can tell right now there's a lot to figure out because there's 7 to 8 new starters on this team. And he likes to build a defense around the strengths he has on the field, as opposed to maybe forcing players into a system. That being said, I did find something he said very interesting in that he was asked about Travis Hunter, obviously, because playing without Travis defensively is a big difference. You can't do nearly as much as you did, even though you still have tons of talent here, Travis. He's a unicorn, as Coach Livingston has said many, many times himself. I thought it was interesting. He said that they're going to be doing more of the NFL stuff this year and probably less of some of the Travis-specific packages that they were able to do last year. So it does require, in some way, shape, or form, relearning a lot and teaching new stuff, not even relearning, just teaching new stuff and implementing, a newer scheme. So I think that you will see Colorado's defense do some things a little bit differently this year because that's how big of an impact Travis Hunter had, not only on the field, but on the scheme. And he talked about at length the impact Travis had on the program as far as the other players in the program looking up to Travis, aspiring to Travis, seeing what it looks like to be great, or at least that version of greatness, and trying to strive towards it. It's a massive investment of influence into the program to have someone like Travis Hunter. It's very refreshing to know that they have the leadership, the coaching in place to be able to point that out as if it really needed to be, but to be able to point that out and make sure that everyone was able to appreciate it while they were here. Not that they needed much help, because it doesn't really take much help to appreciate being able to watch and or play with Travis Hunter and or coach Travis Hunter. Found that all fascinating. He talked about the concept of leadership and how leadership, right, it changes over significantly. And if you've been listening to the podcast with Brian and I, this is something that I've talked about at length. They're really going to have to replace most of their major leadership tentpoles at most every position. And that stuff develops organically. It's not like you can just slap a C on anybody's chest and they're the captain. That's not how it works. That stuff is earned. And he said that leaders are not anointed, they're followed, which I really like the way that was put as well. And he talked about how Arden Walker is in the mix there, as is DJ, as is Preston Hodge. He also talked about Carter Stoutmire, and he's curious to see what comes out of the linebackers room as far as leadership goes, which I asked DJ McKinney about that specifically, and he mentioned Martavius French, which we've heard a lot of good things about the incoming transfer at linebacker. It's a big year for Martavius French, who he thought his football career was over, but because of the JUCO ruling, he was able to come back and play for another year. So he's living on, it's kind of like a free roll this year. So make it count. And I think he has really taken the steps French has. Looking forward to meeting him to assert himself as maybe one of the leaders of this defense, which is massive. They need somebody to step up at linebacker, if not multiple. They need multiple. They probably need around 3 this year, I'm thinking, but at minimum 1 has to be a dude. And I think that Reggie Hughes is another guy in that linebacker room who was, given some credit by Phil Steele, I believe, coming from Jacksonville State. They said Phil Steele thought he was preseason, I think it was honorable mention or 4th team all Big 12. He definitely gave him some preseason accolades though. So some expectations are there. We just need to see it. And I think maybe we're just a little bit predisposed, or maybe I am, certainly from having been around it the first year, of just how much of a week-to-week process finding 2 guys was. Hopefully they can find some more stability and maybe even a little bit of a rotation, because I think there is a possibility. So it'll be interesting to see what they do at the linebacker position. Coach Livingston as well mentioned he's looking forward to seeing how that competition develops throughout training camp. He talked about having different types of leaders, just finishing that leadership conversation. He talked about you got leaders like Cam and you got leaders like Travis. I need a little bit of both. So it doesn't just mean because one person's voice is always being heard, you can't lead in a different way. And I think it'll be fascinating to see who comes out as those guys. I think we know DJ, Arden, Preston, Carter. Those are some guys right there who I would say you can in Sharpie right now put down as leaders. It just doesn't mean that everybody leads in the same way. Let's see. One thing that we spoke about with him today that he's talked about a lot in the past, that especially last year, it was a different perspective coming in as a defensive coordinator and building a scheme around what you have, right? And catering it to your talent. He talked about how Arden Walker is one of his shooters. He uses a basketball analogy. He talked about how Arden Walker is one of his shooters. He also mentioned Quincy Wiggins, which is a name that Coach Prime brought up a lot in the spring. I mean, if we're giving awards for how they look getting off the bus, Quincy Wiggins wins, first place at the county fair, because this dude is, you know what I mean? Like he's stacked, okay? So I'm looking forward to seeing what he is going to contribute this year, because that's a loaded position room. I just saw today, I believe it was Darius with Reach the People put out there, hell of a play by London Merritt picking off Ryan Staub in the backfield, day 2 of real, day 2 of real camp. So I love to see it. It's fantastic to see that, because the competition is going to be there when you've got Okunlola, who is back in practice after missing the spring due to injury. Really big fall for him to get back up to speed again and get his body right, because they need him this year. Arden Walker as well, and you've got some interesting options that you can use at edge. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that group, Keaton Wade, I mean, there's tons of talent in there, what those guys can do. Stylistically, he talked about having 2 different types, or at least multiple different types of quarterbacks is nice to prepare for, because with Shedeur, you've got the stand in the pocket and deal stuff, which is his bread and butter. We all know that. He's not going to be necessarily as mobile as Salter, not that he couldn't at least be mobile enough to make what was it, the FBS career completion percentage record, fall to him. You know what I mean? That's the difference there, is that you do have different styles and you can throw different looks, so you will be more prepared. And Carter Stoutmire talked about how, look, having Caden Salter and having Juju, it's like an air raid, but having Salter is also like the speed option, which helps you prepare for Georgia Tech, which is first on the schedule. And that's a little bit different than what they've had in the past, where you have 2 guys who can really do it. They had another look last year in Walter Taylor, because he was a little bit of a mobile guy, but wasn't a great passer. So now you got 2 guys who have some different skill sets and certainly can prepare your defense for whatever it is that's coming down the field on the next Saturday. He also said that he was blown away by Juju's mentality, and thinking that Juju should be a high school senior this year just blows his mind, thinking about where he was at 17. Yes, I mean, Juju's a very mature young man, and it looks like he's had a really nice start to fall camp as well, at least from what we've been shown through clips. So looking forward to seeing that quarterback competition develop. Undoubtedly, talk to DJ McKinney. This is DJ's year. Coach Livingston said he can be as good as he wants to be. This is one of the stars of this year's team, and he's got 2 years left if he needs it. which is big because I think DJ has the potential to be, top 3 corner in the country this year. And if it doesn't work out, he's going to have another year to do that if he really wants to push his stock. But with a great season, he'll be off to the NFL. So really looking forward to what DJ can bring. DJ's a great young man coming over from Oklahoma State. I remember talking to him at the end of last year after we all got back from New York for the Heisman ceremony, and he was one of the guys who went out there, and he said he was inspired by Travis walking through the door with that trophy. And hey, man, why can't that be me? I think DJ's really embraced it this summer. He does look bigger himself. He talked about how he knows he has to be more vocal, and he also mentioned that he's seeing those leadership tent poles arise. He talked about Martavius French. He talked about Anquin Barnes as being a leader among that defensive line group, which is interesting. Haven't really heard his name much associated with leadership, but good to see that just another year of these young men growing up, right? That they're getting better, they're getting older, they're getting wiser. That's how it goes. It's fun when you reach a certain age when you're definitively older than the guys you're covering, because I've covered these guys for a long time, even when I was similar to their age or a year or two removed. That was a long time ago now, but it's fun watching year to year, having a relationship with these young men and then watching them develop and grow as men first. That's always the thing that I think is the most fun to watch. Obviously, as players, it bears out on the field, but as men having those relationships, it's fun because you just see the growth and you see the impact that Coach Prime and his coaching staff and being in Boulder has had on a lot of these guys, and it's just been overwhelmingly positive. DJ is another example of that, and I know he would tell you that himself. The one interesting thing that we haven't really heard about yet from a player, DJ really hit on. He said in not so many words, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here, that the standard had already been set. So some of the newer players that came in more or less knew what the coaching staff was looking for. And then once they got onto the field, they were much quicker to pick things up because the standard had been set. And I was thinking about that, kind of driving back from practice and going, it's funny because that first year you go, 4-9, and it wasn't good. There was September, which was amazing. And then beyond that, there was not a lot of big highlights the rest of the year, football wise. So you don't lose 7 of your last 8 games or 8 of your last 9, whatever. I think it was 8 of the last 9, and really set a high standard for the next season. You can do it, but not through your play. When your standard is spoken for through how you play, it has a much more significant impact, which is what I think DJ was saying here, is that, look, they saw what it was last year. They saw 9 wins. They saw Travis. They saw Shador. They saw, Shiloh and Cam and LeJontay and Jimmy and Will and all these guys go to the NFL, and BJ go to the NFL and get shots like that. They understand what the standard is here now. Colorado's 9-win team last year. The standard is success. We've talked about this, and Coach Prime spoke about it, and I think it's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to hearing what the theme is this year. Year 1 was hope, right? Year 2 is expectation that they're going to be a good team. What is year 3? But it really was established, the expectation, which in turn establishes a standard moving forward. And the hope there is that you have enough high character individuals to be able to hand over the reins and to be able to have enough awareness to absorb some of that stuff by osmosis and understand without needing to be told what it looks like moving forward. And DJ says, look, there's the standard, but we want to bring it higher. And that's the buy-in that you need across your program. So you need that from your leaders. And DJ has been nothing but since he arrived on campus, and only going to grow this year as he becomes the guy. That's the truth. You could tell when he was asked about Coach Prime's battle, it hit him hard, man. I mean, these kids, especially in the cornerback room. I mean, especially a guy like DJ McKinney, but in general, there's a lot of love on this team. And he brought up, or it was Carter who brought it up, that this is a closer team than they've had the first 2 years. And, that's Papa Bear, right? Coach Prime. So, that hits everybody. That affects everything. And I think the one thing that you've got to credit the coaching staff for is the fact, like I brought up, how they held the fort down for Coach Prime. But the other part of this is I think they were good enough and stable enough to do that over the summer. If we had gotten to fall camp and for whatever reason, recovery, et cetera, he was not there, that's when the real impact of that would have been felt. And his presence alone there is so settling to everybody, but it's also energizing and revitalizing because of who he is. But I did see today, it was like, okay, he got back and he made the decision not to get chemo, so he didn't have to do all that stuff. So he could be back. And that's a sacrifice he made for the team and certainly for, whatever was in his best interest. But that's how much that stuff means to him too. So don't think that the kids didn't notice that. And especially because a lot of them didn't know, about it, that certainly when you're told something like that about someone that you love and you weren't able to be there for them, it's hard to deal with, right? When people suffer in silence, you want to be there for them, but also people have their own journeys to go on. And the other part of this is Coach Prime didn't want to be a distraction, but certainly it's a big thing to have to wrestle with at 18 to 22 years old. It just is for anyone. He talked about summer, and he also lauded, the summer strength and conditioning program. He said it's just working better, which, I mean, who doesn't love to hear that? Absolutely. Carter Stoutmire, definitely one of my favorite interviews, as is DJ, but Carter Stoutmire is right there with Jordan Seaton. Is probably my favorite interview this year heading into the season. I'll be interested to see if any of the new guys jump into that as we start to meet them. Haven't really met any of them. Carter is out of his shell now in year 3 as one of the leaders of this defense. And he's bounced around a little bit, but I even asked him this today. I was thinking about it the other day. Really, he and Kareem Harden, for the most part, are the only two guys that have received in some way, shape, or form significant snaps the first 3 years of Coach Prime, as I expect both of those guys to be in the mix, right? Kareem Harden was the dog of the day for offense the very first practice, so don't go writing him off just yet. I think it's interesting, though, that at least the first 2 years, they were probably the only two that consistently had a lot of snaps that are returning for year 3, which kind of speaks to the transfer portal and NIL and the new era, and certainly of the approach of how this team is being constructed and built. But Carter is starting to, you can really see Carter was a little timid at first. He was definitely quiet at first his freshman year, and he played as a true freshman. He was in some big situations and relied on as a true freshman. So he's been through the fire. I don't think anything on the field really makes him nervous, but he's still learning for sure. And I asked him about where do they got you now, right? We all have him penciled in as safety or, in pen in some way, shape, or form, but they have used him at nickel and corner and in different situations. And I imagine that they'll probably do some of that this year, but they want him to be one of their mainstays at safety. He said this is the first year that he's really trained for safety, and he's had injuries in the past, so hasn't really had full off seasons. This being, I believe, his first full off season and now actually really training for this position specifically, that should have a transformative difference, because he admitted today, and I pushed him a little bit, but he did admit that when he went in last year due to injury, when his number was called, he had never actually had game reps at safety. Even though his father was an NFL safety, he'd never played the position in any sort of official game. That was a big deal, to just get thrown in there without really knowing what's going on, and just, instinctively going out there and playing. And in fact, he played really well in a few games last year. Certainly some areas to clean up, but that's also because he didn't have a firm grasp on the position, let alone knowledge of really, what was required of him in that role completely. And he said that this year he got with his dad a lot over the summer, and certainly Coach Livingston, who was a safeties coach for the Cincinnati Bengals for, a bunch of years. And I don't know how you could really find two better people to help you out with learning the position. So you could see the confidence in Carter. You could see the definition. Another young man who has been really positively affected by Swayze's presence is Carter Stoutmire, who also talked about how tough it was to watch, to know that Coach Prime was going through that battle, because Coach Prime's like an uncle to him. He said Coach Prime was in the room when he was born. So, which obviously, because he and his dad, right, played in the NFL together, it's cool to see that type of a relationship. I mean, what now let me ask you, let me put this out there. What other player, okay, across the country had their head coach there when they were born and their coach wasn't their dad? I'm guessing, right? That's just a crazy, cool, different story about Carter, and I'm looking forward to fans really starting to appreciate who he is this year, and really hoping that Carter has a big, big season, because he's got some real talent, man. I mean, he could play on Sundays for sure. He's got the build for it, and I think he's got the mentality for it. He's a really, really hard worker. He wants it. He's one of the leaders. He knows that. He says being in the system now, paying his dues, seeing how everyone else did it, has empowered him to be that type of a leader as well. He also talked about how Juju and Caden bring different styles. And as a safety, certainly it makes you have to prepare for a lot of different things. And it's also, as I brought up earlier, a great way to prepare for their first game of the year, right, with Georgia Tech, having a quarterback that's more mobile. They couldn't really do that as much as effectively the last few years. So it'll be interesting to see if that has an impact on how they stop the quarterback run, because they were able to tamp that down at times last year, but that has always been one of CU's Achilles heels, is just getting gashed on the ground by the quarterback. They really bottled up KJ Jefferson's wow, I almost said something I probably shouldn't have said. They slow behind at UCF. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see if that has an impact. And he believes in the offense. He said that he really thinks they have something in the offense, that everybody's bringing it every day. And one thing that I've said is the level of competition is just, much different overall, because there's more position battles than there have been, I would say, in the past overall. So especially with quality depth, and that makes a significant difference. So that was today's practice. Those are my takeaways. Just wanted to give everybody a little bit of an update. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. As always, like and subscribe. You know the drill. We'll talk to you later this week.